SITREP World Briefing for May 15, 2026. Russia launched a large-scale drone and missile attack on Ukraine overnight, with Kyiv as the main target, sending emergency crews into apartment blocks and other damaged sites across the capital. Ukrainian rescuers pulled bodies from the rubble of residential flats as the death toll climbed during search operations. The strike placed civilians in the center of Moscow's campaign against Ukraine, with damage concentrated in neighborhoods where people were inside their homes when the barrage hit. The attack highlighted Kyiv's continuing vulnerability after years of strengthened air defenses, because Russia has repeatedly used mixed salvos of drones and missiles to stretch interception systems and increase the chances that some weapons will get through. As Ukraine's political center and the seat of President Volodymyr Zelensky's government, Kyiv carries both military and symbolic importance, so a strike of this size is intended not only to destroy buildings, but also to demonstrate that Russia can still hit the capital after more than 4 years of war. Rescue work continued as authorities cleared debris and searched damaged apartment blocks for additional victims. The latest barrage also carried diplomatic weight beyond the battlefield, because major strikes on Kyiv routinely shape the arguments Ukraine's allies may air defense support, military aid, and sanctions on Russia. European leaders moved quickly to voice support for Ukraine after the assault. For residents of Kyiv, the immediate reality was more basic: another night spent under missile and drone attack, followed by daylight rescue operations in the ruins of city homes. U.S. President Donald Trump and Chinese President Xi Jinping wrapped up their summit in Beijing on Friday, with both leaders presenting the talks as a step towards steadier bilateral relations. Trump said the meetings had produced fantastic trade deals and that the two sides had settled a lot of different problems, while Xi described the visit as a milestone. The summit closed after final talks in the Chinese capital, where both governments sought to show that the world's two largest economies can keep negotiating even after years of tariffs, export controls, and political mistrust. The emphasis from Trump was on commerce, with the U.S. president touting business wins at the end of the superpower summit. Chinese officials used the occasion to press Washington on Taiwan, and Beijing also raised concerns linked to Iran and the Strait of Hormuz, signaling that strategic disagreements were not set aside even as both sides highlighted economic progress. That combination of trade optimism and security friction reflects the structure of the current relationship: intense interdependence in goods and finance, paired with sharpening rivalry over military posture, technology, and regional influence. The Beijing meeting matters well beyond the ceremonial language, because U.S.-China ties shape supply chains, commodity markets, and security calculations across Asia. Even modest movement on trade can affect industries from agriculture to advanced manufacturing, and any effort to stabilize leader-to-leader contact reduces the risk that disputes over Taiwan or maritime access will spill further into the economic relationship. By ending the summit with a claim of progress rather than a breakdown, Trump and Xi preserved space for more talks, but the warnings issued by Beijing made clear that neither side has narrowed the core political divides that have defined the relationship in recent years. The United States is reportedly seeking to indict former Cuban President Raul Castro. The move, reported on Thursday, targets the 94-year-old brother of late Cuban leader Fidel Castro, and comes as the Trump administration hardens its posture toward Havana. An attempt to bring charges against a former Cuban head of state would represent a confrontational step with consequences for any remaining channels of dialogue. The reported effort lands at a moment when Cuba is already under severe strain, with the island facing a deepening energy crisis alongside long-standing economic isolation. Raul Castro remains a central figure in the Cuban revolutionary state even after leaving the presidency, and any U.S. indictment effort would carry symbolic weight because it would directly target a member of the family that has dominated Cuba's political system since 1959. For Washington, the significance of the reported case goes beyond one individual, because Cuba policy has long served as a test of how far U.S. administrations are willing to combine sanctions, diplomacy, and criminal law. For Havana, The development threatens to push relations further away from any pragmatic accommodation at a time when the government is trying to preserve authority amid shortages and failing infrastructure. The dispute risks extending from economic coercion into a more overtly judicial confrontation centered in Washington. Small protests broke out in Havana on Thursday as Cuba's fuel shortage intensified and compounded existing shortages of electricity and food. Cuban authorities said reserves had been exhausted and blamed U.S. sanctions for worsening the island's access to energy supplies, while residents in the capital faced another day of disrupted transport, long waits, and rolling pressure on basic services that depend on fuel deliveries. The worsening shortage also prompted urgent activity in Havana as Cuban leaders sought outside help to ease the pressure from what officials described as an oil blockade. The crisis has become more than a transport problem. Fuel deficits can quickly reduce power generation, hamper food distribution, and disrupt hospitals and factories across the island. That helps explain why developments in Havana carry national significance. Because the capital is the center of government and the main hub for imports, storage, and distribution. Any interruption there ripples through the rest of Cuba's already strained economy, where reduced foreign exchange earnings and import constraints have left authorities with limited room to stabilize supply. For Cuba, fuel shortages are especially destabilizing because the country relies heavily on imported oil to keep its power grid and public transport running, and repeated supply interruptions have become politically sensitive after years of economic decline. With reserves depleted and pressure mounting on the government to restore deliveries, any diplomatic opening or external assistance could affect not only gasoline and diesel availability, but also the broader reliability of electricity generation and food distribution in the coming days.